What's the average salary of a youth pastor? And how do you go about getting a raise? On this episode of Student Ministry Connection, we're diving into the 2026 Youth Pastor Compensation Report. Let's get ready to connect and grow. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection. My name is Steve Cullum. On episode 38, back in 2019, I talked to Dan Navarra about his youth pastor compensation survey and report, which has become an amazing resource for youth pastors over the years. And since then, we've made it a point to continue talking about compensation every couple of years. Not that any of us get into student ministry because of the pay, but it is nice to put food on the table and to take care of yourself and your family. And so youth pastors are often in a really tough place. We don't want to be greedy, but we also want to make sure we're getting compensated appropriately. But what is appropriate and adequate when it comes to youth pastors' salary? Well, that's why this report is so important. And now, not only do we have the previous year's data, but we also have 9 years of data to look back at. And instead of Dan Navarra this year, I'm talking with Josh Boldman, the CEO of Download Youth Ministry. I'll let you wait until Josh and I talk about why the switch, but I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation today, to connect with Josh, to learn some valuable information about compensation, and to also hear how DYM can help your ministry. Let's jump right in. Well, hey, Josh, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Dude, what's going on?
It's good to have you here for this episode. And just to make sure, this is Josh is not to be confused with the co-founder of DYM, Josh Griffin, whom I've also had on for another episode, 81 back in 2022. So this is a different Josh from DYM.
We like to keep it confusing. I mean,
Yeah,
there literally 2/7 of our staff is named Josh. That is
yeah,
higher than the national average, but
yeah.
we do it. We do okay.
So, Josh, it's been great to get to know you over the years and hear more of your story and just see what God has continued to do through you. But for my sake, but also the sake of our community, let's start with your story and your testimony.
Yeah, man.
How'd you end up, entering into a relationship with Jesus? How'd you get started in ministry?
Yeah. So I was somebody who was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that believed and that attended church. We always joke. I think like when we had our son, they were like, "Don't take him out in public for like 6 weeks or whatever." Germs and whatever. I'm pretty sure that I was born on a Tuesday and went to church on Wednesday night.
Nice.
Like it's just and to like not just like church, but like to the potluck. Like it was just we went to the thing where all the germs are. But yeah, just super great being able to grow up in a Christian family, and then finally by the time I got to high school, had a really cool opportunity to be a part of a school that was designed to be diverse. Like, so I mean, it was kids from really like I lived 45 minutes away from my high school because I mean they bust us all in and all. And what we ended up with was this really cool environment full of people who came from very very different backgrounds and believed very very different things, and in that environment it felt kind of like a little bit of a meat grinder, like it's like, okay, well, this is going to go one of two ways. And for me, what it was really really cool is I found myself in situations where I was being genuinely asked about what I believed, and there were times where I didn't know or wasn't sure, and in that process and kind of working through all that, really coming to a point where I can say that I actually owned and chose my own faith. Like, it's that constant struggle of like, how do we help students see that their faith is not, it doesn't belong to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, like it belongs to them. And I was able to be in a situation where I was really encouraged to dig in and ask myself really tough questions about what I really believe and what I really believe to be true, and then to share that with people who did not agree. Like, and it was again, it sounds like it was like it was really, there's animosity, or it really wasn't. It was this really cool melting pot of people who were curious about me, and that I was able to be curious about them, and through that, really kind of coming to some bedrock on, well, this is not just who I believe God to be, but who I believe myself to be because of God, and how does that all work? And so then, wrestling through that with my family and our youth pastor at my church, realizing that there was this call that God had placed on my life to influence students, and so then went to Bible college and did that whole thing, and became a youth pastor way too young. Um, I always joke about the fact that, hiring someone who's 18 to be a youth pastor was the worst decision on their part and the worst decision on my part. But it was the best possible case scenario. I'm so grateful that I got that opportunity to lead students while I was in college. And then just kept going from there. And then, 20 some odd years later, got this really great opportunity to step in and to leadership at the DYM team. And it's been just a dream come true, because now we get to help youth pastors around the world do what we love doing, like, and knowing that it's not just some random people making resources for youth pastors, but it's youth pastors making resources for youth pastors. It's
Yeah,
yeah, it's just one of the greatest joys that we get to have, is knowing that we're really leaning into something that is an area of passion for us, and we get to resource other people that have that same passion. It's just the coolest thing.
that's cool. Yeah, I love when I get to talk to other youth leaders about DYM, and I get what you guys do. It really helps youth leaders on both sides because you're helping to take what a
Mhm.
lot of them have and they've used and everything already. So
Yep.
you're supporting youth leaders in that way, and then you're helping them to then turn it into something that's going to help more youth leaders, which is
Right.
such a cool thing to be able to help both sides of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we get to always ask the question, like, what are the things we wished we had when we first were getting started, and then now have the ability to help create those things, and to then, I mean, go and find. I mean, that's probably the best part about DYM, is that it's this marketplace where all the stuff that's on there was created by somebody else, right? It's the stuff that, they made a really good game, or an incredible lesson, or a handout, or a countdown. I mean, any of the stuff that's on there, it's only on there because it worked in their context. Like,
Mhm.
they're youth pastors. They were going to make this either way for their own students, and now that then they get to share it with everybody else. It's just the coolest thing, because there's nothing worse than having a really really good idea that you can only use one time,
Yeah,
and then it's gone. And I feel like this just lets everybody have this a bit wider net for the influence, and for them to use the gifts that God has given them, and to really be able to help, because there's nothing worse than knowing I'm really good at this one thing, but I'm not good at this. Like, I'm really good at making games, but I am terrible at making graphics, or and so, like, it lets the youth pastor that's really good at one thing be awesome at
mm,
that, and let other people fill in some of those gaps, and then, yeah, just there's an overall win, I think, just for youth ministry as a whole, and then, I mean, for students, and ultimately for God's kingdom, because I think we're willing to, I don't know, there's a little bit of humility that has to be involved to use somebody else's stuff.
sure.
Like, it's like, I want to be able to say I made all the things, or that this is all, but being able to say, like, I could spend all my time making this game, or this graphic, or this lesson, or whatever, but then I miss out on being able to spend time with my students, and being able to spend time doing the things that I am good at. Yeah, it's just something really cool that happens when you let others in the community fill in those areas where maybe it's not your strongest suit, or maybe you just don't have time for it. Either way, it's very very cool.
Yeah, yeah. I found myself many, many times wishing that, if our students are impressed by a specific game or whatever, I wish I could tell them, "Yeah, I made that. That's sweet." But the
Yeah.
truth is, no, I purchased it off BYM. So I started saying, "Oh, my friend made this." because if he's
Yeah.
in youth ministry and provided me with a resource, he's my friend or she's my
Yeah.
friend.
Well,
So,
and I mean, and let's just call it what it is too. I mean, that's one of my other favorite things about the DYM community is that those people are my friends now. Like,
yep,
I mean, it's and that please hear me, that started well before I started working at DYM. Like that was,
yep,
I mean, you'd use a game from somebody and then they'd release another one, and they were just constantly these like really great hits. And ultimately, I always ended up I'd reach out to that person and just
yep,
wanted to tell them like, "Hey, your game rocked. Like that was so good." But then you just end up kind of building friendships and building relationships with people that you just would not have been able to connect with otherwise. And it's super, super cool.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, thanks for all you guys do there at DYM.
Oh, no, of
I've
course,
benefited
man.
from it, and I know so many others do as well.
Yeah, it's a
But
privilege for sure. For sure.
so let's talk about compensation,
Yeah.
and I
Okay.
want to
Mhm.
start here by just addressing the elephant in the room. People that have been around the podcast for a while,
Yeah.
they know that every couple years I talk about the youth pastor compensation report, and I speak
Mhm.
with Dan Navarra about this report,
Mhm.
and so here I am talking to Josh Boldman.
Yeah, what's going on there?
What's going on there? So what
Yeah.
led you guys at
Yeah.
DYM, you specifically, to kind of take the
Yep.
reins and be heavily involved in this compensation report?
So anyone who is a part of the DYM Facebook group knows that when someone posts a job listing that does not include a salary window, um, they will get a response from me. And I want to be clear that this is actually me doing this. This is not automated. This is like I mean, some of it's copy paste each time, but like it's me actually doing it. But but I always tell them like, hey, we're so glad that you want to post this job listing here. But we do want to let you know some things that we've learned over the years, and that's that if you really want to get traction, you need to include a salary window. And so I've been doing this for years, and that is why Dan Navarra and I connected in the first place was because he was like, yes, yes, every job listing should have a salary window. But I think I have been a benefactor of the youth pastor compensation report for years. Being in the roles where I knew I was underpaid and needing, let's just be honest, needing some ammunition for the conversation I was going to be having with my supervisor. And the work that Dan has done set me up for those conversations in a way that I would not have been able to have. The only other thing I would have ever been able to do is say, I think I should be getting paid more. And that's it. And what Dan has done is he's given us almost a decade of data to be able to show this is what youth pastors are getting paid. And then not saying this is what they should be getting paid or what, but like this is it. Thousands and thousands of youth pastors have filled out this survey over the last 9 years to give us this really robust set of data to show what a youth pastor is making in North America in over the last 10 years. And so when he mentioned that he was thinking about potentially handing the reins over to someone, he asked if I'd be interested, and I was like, I didn't even let him finish the sentence. I was like, yes, absolutely, without a question, you bet. We are in. DYM is in on this thing because at the end of the day, we always say for DYM, it's that we're here to help youth workers win. And it is really, really hard for a youth worker to win when they are struggling to provide for their family. It's just, is it impossible? No, by no means. Like, I mean, and we all know this. I mean, if you've been in youth ministry any period of time, you have struggled financially. There's a really good chance. Um, but I think that there's a lot that we can do to help finances not have to be the chief worry that youth workers have on a week to week basis. We should be able to be worrying about the lessons we're teaching, the relationships that we're building, the leaders that we're building, all, like there's so many other things that it's like, why should that be the constant nagging thought in the back of people's mind of just I'm going to get paid this week and I know it's not enough. That's brutal. And so yeah, so that's the biggest thing is not only because the youth pastor compensation report has been a lifeline for me, but also because it's just I think that when any of us does better, we all do better, and when we have all of the information possible, that's when we have the best shot at actually doing better than we currently are. So yeah, so this is, oh man, please do not hear me saying I am trying to replace Dan. I am, because I am not, but I know like DYM taking this report on, we are standing on the shoulders of a actual giant. He just cannot stress enough, how humble I am for Dan and for the work that he has done. I think that he has changed many, many lives, not just because that meant that people were being paid better, but I think because people got paid better, they were able to stay at their church longer, and because of that, they were able to invest in students more. And so, I mean, the ripple effect of what Dan has done is something that I think is going to continue to be felt in the kingdom for generations. And
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm exaggerating when I say that.
I do not think so either. Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's so invaluable to what
Mhm.
we do because yeah, we go into youth ministry ultimately to make an impact on the next
Yeah.
generation for Jesus.
Yep.
That's really it. It's not to make a lot of money. However,
Oh man.
it's nice to be able to pay your rent and put food on the table
Sure.
and take care of your family. Like when you're not able to do that, like,
Yeah.
then your
Yeah.
ministry is
And
probably going to suffer.
And that's what's so tough about this conversation, because as soon as you start talking about, I don't make enough, or my salary is not big enough, like things like that, it's really easy for somebody to say, well, then it's all just about the money. It's that is not it at all. Like no
Yeah.
one gets into ministry because they're like, this is gonna be great for my portfolio.
Yeah.
Like that's just not how this works. But the reality that most of us get into ministry as a step of faith, that we believe God is calling us to do this, and we know that yes, the salary is never going to be huge, but oh, the idea that we should not need a livable wage is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so like the idea that when someone is worried about how much they're making and they begin the conversation with their supervisor or with their church board, or whoever it is that they have to have that conversation with, so often in that conversation, their faith gets questioned. Like, well, if you really believe, God will take care of you.
Mhm.
It's like, I'm here because I believe that. Period. Now, as part of my faith, I need to have this conversation. Like that's what I feel like this report does, is it gives context,
Mhm.
to be able to have that conversation in a educated way, and in a way that I think sets you up best to be able to not necessarily always get what you're asking for, but to have a good outcome,
Mhm.
because you're not going in blind.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And I know Dan would say this every time I talk to him about this. Like, we need to be having those conversations, like
Mhm.
up front.
Yep.
We have to be having those conversations. We expect to be, get any sort of raise on a regular basis. We need to be having these conversations and be
Yeah.
like, this resource is going to
Yeah.
be able to fuel that conversation.
Can I say something controversial? Is that
Sure.
okay? Because
Ooh, oh
I've
yeah.
never
Yeah.
been I've never been accused of not being controversial, so I'm going to go ahead and go for this one. I don't think the youth pastor compensation survey should be necessary, because these are conversations that I think supervisors should be having regularly with the youth pastor. Like this, the fact that this compensation survey is enabling youth pastors to have this conversation, like to start the conversation on their own, is a honestly is a tragedy that it should have to happen, but it does. And we're all human, and nobody's perfect. That's great, but like, man, I wish I would love for there to be a day where every church is like, just regularly asking themselves, are we paying our youth pastor enough? Like, are we paying the people that teach our children? Are they able to survive? Like, that would be great to not have to have the youth worker also be in charge of starting that conversation. But there's a reality of where we're at. So again,
Sure.
if I just made everybody mad, I I would say I'm sorry, but I'm not.
You're
Like,
probably
so
not going to make any youth pastors mad.
no,
Yeah,
no, yeah.
they're
So
they're all
for what
sitting
it's
there
worth,
going, "Hey, you know what? This ministry potentially
yeah,
is, one of we can all agree one of the most important in the church. Arguably the
right.
most important. Passing on
I'll
our
say
faith in
it.
the next
Yeah.
generation seems to be talked about a lot in the Bible, and we also see the consequences of when that's not happening. And so we should probably be taking care of the people that are leading the way
Hmm.
in that.
Absolutely, 100%. Couldn't agree
Yeah.
more.
So each year in the compensation
Mhm.
report, I know people want to know the bottom line. So
Yeah.
what is the bottom line for average salary in the United States for a youth pastor in 2025, and then how does that compare to previous years?
Yeah. So the bottom line is the average full time youth pastor in the United States in 2025 made $58,366. Uh, and that's a pretty decent increase from the year before. It's up 4.5%. That's the second largest jump we've ever seen from year to year, which is really good. And again, you know, context, right, is
Mhm,
always going to be the toughest part to argue. But the problem that we see every year is there's a jump, and then if there's a small jump, that's one thing. If it's a big jump, there's another. And when there's a big jump, we celebrate. But inflation from 24 to 25 was also pretty high. And so like anytime we see these numbers, it's very rare that the average increase is actually going to match what cost of living increase that same youth pastor saw that year. And so I'd say where we saw 4.5% jump, good. Um, it would have I think for everyone to really like feel like, hey, we did it. We did it,
mhm.
guys. Uh, it would have had to have been a little bit higher. But I think in all things considered, I think that everybody's feeling extra strapped, and everybody's feeling like, and that goes from the youth worker to every single person in the church and the people who are tithing, and like like when inflation hits, it hits us all. And so I'm actually really glad that we were able to see that big of an increase this year. I'm hoping that we will see that big of an increase again. I'm cautiously optimistic. Very very cautiously. I wouldn't
Yeah.
go into like pessimistic yet, but cautiously optimistic that we'll see a jump like that again.
Sure. Yeah. And like you said, yeah, it really depends on context. We have people that
Mhm.
they're across the board, filling out the survey from
Right.
urban context to suburban to rural and all that sort of thing. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's good to see an increase, at least in the full-time youth pastor average
Yeah.
salary. It's
Yeah.
a decent increase, but like you said, and Dan has said this before as well, when it doesn't match the inflation rate, effectively everybody's getting a pay cut in the middle
It's a
of
pay
what
cut.
looks to be a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And it's so tough because, like, can you imagine? All right, so I mean, and everyone who is a youth pastor who's listening can imagine when your supervisor or your board or whoever it is that tells you what you're going to be making the next year. They come up to you and they're like, "Hey, good news, we're able to give you a 4.5% raise." That is awesome, and the
Mhm.
generosity there, like that man, that is it is so tough to look at that and say that's not enough, like
Right.
but there is a reality that I think just everyone has to recognize is like Dan always says, if it does not keep up with the cost of living, it is a pay cut. And if everybody's willing to call it that, and like, because I've been in situations where I've been in churches where from one year to the next, I got no change whatsoever. And that was explained to me as, we can't, like, we want to, but we can't. And
Mhm.
that, like, I was very grateful for those conversations because it was at least honest. It's like, hey, we recognize we're essentially asking you to take a pay cut by keeping you the same, and we wish we could do something different, but we can't. That's very different than saying, here's your 1% raise, you're welcome. Like
Yeah.
that would be a very different conversation. So I mean, I don't want to make it sound like every time someone gets a raise or that, like, that's not always like it's not always greed, or it's not always the church being stingy. Like, sometimes it's just reality. And so I have a friend who always reminds us that reality is our friend. And so in these conversations, whether you are getting a actual cost of living increase, or whether you're getting that plus a raise, or if you're getting nothing, or if you're actually getting a pay cut, like, one of the best things you can always do in those situations is just be honest with yourself about what is actually happening at that moment. Is, am I getting a pay cut, or am I getting a pay raise? And let that show you, like, okay, I'm responding to this, but don't just respond because it feels good or bad. Respond because you actually understand what is actually happening. Like, that's, I think that's always going to be better off in the long run.
So there's several things that stood out to me as I read
Mhm.
through this year's report, but I'm curious, as someone who spent a lot more time with the data and looking at this a whole
Yeah.
lot more than
Mhm.
I did, what are some of the things that stood out to you?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, and this is gonna sound just like Dan, that over half of youth pastors still don't get an annual review. This is maddening, but it's just again, it's reality, and so like let's call reality what it is. Is that most of the time, if you're going to get any raise or pay bump or anything, it's going to be as a result of an annual review. So if you are not getting a review at all, sometimes okay, I've been in places where getting that review was not fun, right? Like it's not always an annual review is not always them telling you you're doing a great job. Sometimes it's them telling you the exact opposite. And so like so that I think there's a good reason for people that don't get reviews to say like, I'm good. I don't know that I really want one. Like it's fine because it opens you up to scrutiny and it opens you up to maybe a really uncomfortable conversation. But if you're not getting that review, you're probably also not getting a raise. Because I mean, just going in and asking for a raise, it might work. But if it's part of a regular rhythm of a conversation that you're having with your supervisor on a regular basis of how is it going? How am I doing in this job that you hired me to do? That's where you get the best shot of seeing that actually turn into um, to a sizable or any size pay increase. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that just keeps jumping out at me. But also the probably the best one that I saw is the gender wage gap
Mm,
is
yeah.
shrinking. That's very cool. 10% is where we're at. On the average man is making 10% more than the average woman in youth ministry. I think that there is an argument to make that we have a long way to go. Um, that is about 10%. It should
Yeah.
be it should be even. But this
Mhm,
is way better than what we've seen in the past as far as it being 18% at some
mhm.
points. Like that's really substantial. So like we're making really good progress in this. But again, um, reality is our friend. So I mean, there's still work to be done, but that is very encouraging to me.
Yeah,
So I'd say yeah, those are
that's
those are probably the two big ones that really jump out.
that's cool. Yeah. And do you know, knowing that Dan did a lot more of the work this time around, but was in I think last year or 2 years ago, we started to see that start to close a little bit more.
Mhm.
And one of the things that Dan told me that he was curious about was how that was happening because it seemed like that females
Mhm.
were getting paid more, but men effectively didn't get a pay raise. And
Yeah.
so is that happening? Is
Mhm.
yeah, I guess what are the nuances
Yeah.
of that gap
Yeah,
this
there
year?
was there was a point, I believe it was in last year's, where the average salary for men really didn't change and the
Mm,
average salary for women did. I believe in this one it went up for both,
okay,
but I think for men it went up less
sure.
than it did for women. So I mean, so yeah, ladies, great job. I mean, seriously, like advocating for yourselves and having tough conversation. Like this is how it gets done. So encouraging. Yeah, but it
That's
it, it
cool.
is. It's one of the hardest things that I've experienced in ministry as far as my pay is concerned is it's the easiest time to ever get a significant pay bump is by going to a different church. Right. And so like so part of that I think is what we're seeing is the number of women who are being hired as first year.
Mm,
Because right when they get hired, that's when you're going to set your salary, and then
yeah,
from there it's always going to be incremental. Um, so I think that's probably part of this conversation is what are
mm,
we seeing as far as tenure? What are we seeing as far as how many churches someone has served at? But really, I think what I mean I think Dan actually in the report labeled it as the two big factors, right?
mm,
Are going to be your tenure and the church size and the
the
church
budget.
budget, right? Like
Yeah,
those are the things that are really going to stand out as what is going to influence it the most. And
mhm,
what I think would be really cool to maybe, and maybe we might dig into this a little further in next year's, is again seeing, is are we seeing more women being hired at bigger churches? Because that would be a really great way to know, like, is it tenure or is it church size and budget that is really driving the difference between men and women?
Sure. Yeah,
But
that'd
yeah,
be
that's
really
something that we'll
interesting to know.
definitely be looking into for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think what plays into that too, and something that Dan had told me that he was cautious about, and kind of wanting to see how it played out, was
Mhm.
if that gender gap, or the wage gap between genders, would effectively, if we would hit a ceiling in the salary.
Right.
And it
Mhm.
seems like that both the ceiling and the floor have raised this time around.
Yes.
Why is that so significant?
Yes. This is a good and a bad, like, this is so
Yeah.
tough, right? Because it's like, you've got this is a data point that when you look at it, you're like, "This is so good," right? Because people who are starting out new, they're starting out at a higher salary, and people who have been around longer, they are getting a higher salary. The real question in all of that is, what about the people right in the middle,
Mm,
right? Because like I said, easiest way to get a real salary bump is to go to a new church. That's terrible. Like, that should not be the case.
no.
And so there is a question for me that I'm really trying to wrestle through in this whole thing is this the result of people jumping ship and going to other churches, and what does this say about the long-term potential for people who are in the place that God has called them, and they want to stay, and they want to do whatever they can because that is what God is calling them to do. um I that that's the real challenge. Is I feel like it the high and low moved up, but I don't know that the middle
Mm,
moved very much. And so that's why I think that ends up being kind of a significant part of the conversation. Is anytime you have any survey or study where you have a lot of data, it's really easy to pick, like, look, both of these things moved. And it's
yeah.
like, yeah, yes, but there's a wide range in between there that we have to figure out what happened to that. And I think that Dan does a really good job of showing that it yes, we should celebrate that both the high end and the low end moved. But there is still work to be done in the middle, that I think, because
Yeah.
outliers are for real in this one. So this is funny. This is one that we got emails like nonstop about, when we released the survey or the response or the report.
Mhm.
Is there is one person who said that they have a church budget of 50K or less, so
Hmm.
like almost zero, but their average salary was 92,000. And so, like, that puts them as one of the highest earners in the survey. But if their church was only 50,000, how did they do that? And
Yeah.
part of it is like that's a very unique case, where that person was funded by an external organization to then work at this church.
Mm,
So it's very, very unique. And so, like, so it's stuff like that, that when you point out, like, oh man, somebody at a church with a really small budget has a really high salary, and it's like, actually, they have an impossible salary. Like, it's really easy to point out those outliers as proof of something until you start really digging in and say, okay, wait a minute, what is
yeah.
what is the story here? And so I think with some of that low end and high end stuff, we have some of that too, where they are unique situations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that middle, one of the things,
Mhm.
and I don't know if it's significant enough. There's not a lot of people that are in this section, but when it comes to church budget, a
Mhm.
couple things stood out to me, is that people that were within a budget of four to 4.5 million, and then the 15 million or more, were among the highest paid youth pastors. But the lowest paid was right in between that, with a budget of 7 to 10 million. So
Yeah. Uh-huh.
it could just be unique to who filled it out.
Yeah.
But that was like, oh, wow, that middle ground, which may be around, like decent sized
Mhm.
church in
Yeah.
America, are they going to get paid less?
So there, I've got some anecdotal evidence on this one.
Hmm.
As so there was a time. Then so funny. My time in youth ministry was split very evenly between, like, very small churches and very large churches. And so one of the things when I was at a very large church, one of the things that was interesting is we hired a lot of, like, youth ministry interns. or like, and they were full time. Like full
Mm,
time was kind of the thing, or like we would have one person on staff who was, who had more education or had more a more seasoned tenure. That's, I think, a way of me saying that I was the old person on staff. Oh my gosh. But that was, we would hire one person like that,
yeah.
and then we would hire a lot of younger people that either didn't have the tenure or the education, and ultimately would be paid less. And so that would pull the average down. And I kind of wonder
Mm,
if that might be some of what's happening in that area.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, that would
That
be that would be my guess, but only a guess at best.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think from my experience too, I mean, that's usually around that place where, you realize you do need more staff to take care of
Right.
your
Hmm.
capacity and stuff, but maybe you can't hire a full-time experienced youth
Right.
pastor.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. So speaking of education, some youth leaders don't have,
Hmm.
the education that was once really, really pushed.
Yeah.
And we could
Hmm.
go into a whole other podcast about, is that
Oh, for
needed
sure.
and all
Yeah.
those different things. But knowing that in the beginning of this report years ago, that was a factor in people getting paid more. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem to be as much of a factor anymore. What do you think about
No.
that?
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna say my advice for any youth pastor who is contemplating continuing their education, I would say, one, don't do that as a vehicle for making more on your salary. Like, if that's the only reason, don't. But I would say, one of the things that I did Bible college, and then I got a master's of divinity, and I'm actually currently working on a doctorate. Like, I'm just one of those people. I like it. Like, it is, I've always said that I don't ever want to feel called to something that I should have been preparing for earlier. And so I'm just like, I'm just going to keep going, like, and that's fine. But I know that that is not going to be like, I'm going to graduate and suddenly everyone's just going to be giving me more money. Like, it's just not how it works. Um, if there's a specific role that you think, you need that degree in order to be able to achieve that role, like, then by all means go for it. Like, but be honest with yourself. Like, chances are really good that if you're going to go and, pay a lot of money and take on a lot of student loans, that you're going to master's degree, and then it's going to end up being like a 6 or 7% raise. Like, you're like, "Ugh, that's not gonna, it's not
Mm,
gonna quite cover it." And so, I would say I am always going to be a big fan of continuing education. So I'm not ever going to say don't do it, but I will say, like, just know what you're getting yourself into, and make sure that the benefits that you're receiving from that education are more than just a hopeful eventual salary bump, because that may or may not materialize. And what we've seen over the last few years is that that bump is going down. It's just, just what we're seeing. And I think, again, I would guess, just speculating on it, is I think, during COVID, we had a lot of people go back to school, which, again, great. Take the opportunity, go for it, love it. But my guess is that what that resulted in is a lot more people with more advanced degrees, and so that just,
mm.
it makes it less competitive to have one. Would be my guess.
That makes sense. Well, this is so great. I love all this
Mhm.
information. I know, Josh, you and I have talked about research and our love for it, and good
Oh yeah,
research, especially in the ministry world. This is all great to have. But
yeah,
what do we hope leaders actually do with this? Like, it's great to know, but
yes,
what do we do with this report?
yes. All right. So here's the first thing: is read it. That's the first thing. Like, just read the report. Like, the more you know, like, because again, every time that you look at your own paycheck, you probably feel one of two ways or somewhere in between about it. You either are like, yes, this is great, or oh no, that's not enough. And chances are good it's somewhere in between. Um, but when you have an idea of what people in the United States are making doing something similar to what you're doing. And again, it is not apples to apples. If we have 1,000 people fill out the survey, that is 1,000 different jobs that are all called youth pastor. Like, we know the same, but it just helps you have a little bit more of a basis for the feeling that you're having, right? It's like if you're like, I'm just not making enough, if you go to your supervisor with that, that's different than saying, I feel like I'm not making enough. And I actually have a study that shows me what I think I should be making. Like that just that changes the conversation completely. So I would definitely say, understand what's in a report, but two, use this as a conversation starter. I think, I mean, you could be really funny about it and just print a whole bunch of them and just leave them around your church. That might get you fired, but it would be funny. What I would say instead is just email it, to say, tell your supervisor it's coming. Like, hey, I found this report. I want to know what you think about it, and just let them read it. Like, don't go through and highlight individual things and mark things with red arrows. Like, don't use it as a canon. Use it as a conversation starter. Uh, and then what I think will be really good is when you look at the report for multiple years, is it becomes again part of that regular rhythm of even your regular rhythm of evaluations, and having those conversations with your supervisor. It lets you say, this is how I'm doing, but also this is how everyone else is doing. And it just gives you one more reference point to be able to have that and I think if you do that multiple years in a row, then it's not a surprise anymore. And my guess is that your supervisor probably starts expecting it, and maybe even they go look for it before you have the conversation, and that I think can only be good, for you, for sure. So yeah, definitely familiar, but don't just keep it to yourself, because then you'll get mad. You'll just get mad, and
Yeah.
that's not helpful. Have conversations about it with whoever it is that you need to be talking to at your church.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Josh, we're very grateful that you and Download Youth Ministry are kind of taking the reins from, like
No,
what you
yeah,
said, a huge giant of
yeah,
Dan Navarra being able to start this and keep it running for many years. So DYM does so much more than just the compensation report. Tell us a
yes,
little more about DYM, co-leader,
Whew.
everything that
Yeah.
you get to oversee.
Oh my goodness, it's so much. All right, so this is the deal. DYM is like the overarching umbrella of this really really great suite of resources for youth workers all around the globe. The Download Youth Ministry store is a marketplace where youth pastors just like you get to create resources, and they're like, it worked at our church. Here you go, and they put it up. And what is so neat to me is that we're able to offer those resources at such a low price, but then also every time you buy something, the youth pastor who created it gets a cut. And so like it ends up being like this really neat side gig for youth workers who need a little bit of extra support, but then you get to benefit from the best of the best creating resources. It's a win all around. Co-leader is our premium annual youth ministry curriculum. For years, people have been submitting, lessons and stuff to DYM, and people have been asking us forever, when are you going to do your own curriculum? And we're like, we've kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. But there just came a point about 4 years ago where we realized we've learned a lot by editing other people's stuff. And we know what people are looking for and what they're not. And so we created what honestly, maybe a little biased, but I believe is the best annual youth ministry curriculum available. It's so good. And the best part about any of it is that it, as part of the DYM umbrella, we always are going to keep it at the cheapest that we possibly can. And so if you're looking for an annual curriculum, not only are you going to find that it is about half the price of anything else that you're looking for, but we want to help. So like if there's ever a time where you're just like, I want this, but I can't afford this, or just reach out. Like we're serious about making sure that this is available to as many people as possible. And then we got, man, it's just so many other things.
Hmm.
There's so much stuff. You should be
There
in the
is.
Facebook group if you're not. We have the DYM community Facebook group is it's about almost 20,000 youth workers around the world that are there to ask and to answer questions all the time. Sometimes they start little fights. It's kind of fun. We try to clamp down on it pretty quick, but every once in a while one gets through. But something we're really proud of recently, we just launched the PACA small group toolkit,
Yeah.
that is free. It's literally free. There's like, I mean, and it's not like it's free for now. No, it's free forever. Like it's free. There's no subscription, and it is just a bunch of like conversation starter type games and stuff for you to give to your small group leaders to help them in that seventh grade small group that is just a nightmare. And we it just the goal is to help. So it's got like icebreaker questions and would you rather's and like spinning wheels and all kinds of stuff there. And Steve, I actually get to tell you this because we've not told anybody this yet, but
Mm.
it actually, as of recording, it should actually be released today. So I don't know when this will come out, but by then it'll be old news. But
Yeah.
it's we released it originally. Paca was on iPhone only, but now it is available on Android as well.
Ah.
For that one youth leader that you
Yeah.
have that
I
is
think I
still
know him.
on Android and and they make sure that they're on Android. That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
like is yeah. So but it is available for both. And the coolest part about this app is so the icebreaker questions and the low prep games and the would you rather you can actually submit your own and then they go in the list. And so like as people are answering these questions, they're answering questions that maybe even you submitted. So it's super super cool. Get that on the App Store or Google Play. Uh, I think that's every. I don't know. Go to downloadyouthministry.com. Check it all out. There's so much. There's so much there, and
There
you're going to
is.
be
There
like,
is.
"How much is it?" Very cheap.
Yeah.
That's the answer. Because we love you guys. We love all youth workers, and we want to see you win. So we're committed to it.
And then you got your trainings and your events and all that
Oh
stuff on
yeah.
top of it. There's so
Yeah,
much
the
there.
National Day.
Oh, so
Check
great.
that we've got National Day of Youth Ministry and Kids Ministry now.
Mm.
We just filmed both of those earlier this week, and they're phenomenal. The what One of our team members just this morning we were talking, and she said the youth ministry one just continues to get better and better. She's like, but the jump in like the content for the kids ministry from last year to this, she's like, I thought last year's was incredible. This
Mm.
one is so good. She's like, it's
Cool.
so good. And I'm like, that is so like that makes me
Mm.
feel so good that we're just continuing to make it better and better. And a lot of people ask why kids ministry? Why are we doing this? Look, plain and simple, a healthy middle school ministry starts in elementary school.
Amen.
Period. So anything that if you're a youth pastor and you're like having a fight with your kids pastor, stop it. Stop it right now and go be their best friend because they are awesome and
Yeah.
they are creating a ministry that you are going to take the reins of. So
Mm.
like please, please, please support your children's pastors, your children's workers because they're amazing.
Mm.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, 100%. Josh, I love how like this this marriage of the compensation survey and what you guys do at DYM makes so
Mhm.
much sense for many reasons. One, because of what you guys do and that you make it so affordable for so many youth
Mhm.
leaders, but also you do give an opportunity for those youth leaders who are not maybe making as much as they would like to start
Yeah.
submitting your stuff on the
Yeah. Oh,
store
yeah.
and you can get a
Yeah,
nice little side
please
gig.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to downloadyouthministry.com, go to the bottom, there's like a submit my stuff. Like, seriously, do it because if you send it in and it's amazing, we put it on the store. If it's slightly less than amazing, we'll give you feedback on how to fix it so that we can put it on the store. And I mean, that's how I got connected to DYM. I was an author, oh gosh, I think almost 10 years ago now, something like that. And it's so neat. I mean, yes, it's nice to get a little bit of a royalty check every once in a while. That's fun. But I tell you what, when you start seeing that other churches are using the
Mm,
stuff that you made, there's something about it that it reminds you of how big the kingdom is,
yeah.
and that is so fun. It is
Yeah.
so fun. And so, yeah, if you're ever interested, please reach out to me or anyone on the team. Send an email to support at downloadyouthministry.com and we'll help you figure out how to get your stuff on the store. It's so cool.
Cool. Cool. Where can people find you, connect with more with you online, DYM,
Yeah.
compensation stuff,
Yeah.
all that?
All that stuff. So obviously you can go, DYM is downloadyouthministry.com. You can go to co-leader.co for co-leader. For me, I'm at Josh Boldman, pretty much anywhere that you can. I don't know, Facebook, Instagram, all of the, I don't know, any of them. Um, but then, yeah, just seriously, what people always talk about all the time, like when they email in and then like a actual human being responds, and they're like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting an actual response." Our team is small but mighty, and we literally like it's a bunch of human beings that are here. And so, if you email me at josh.boldman at downloadyouthministry.com, that comes to my inbox, and I will respond eventually. It's maybe not it's maybe not always right away, but it is like it. We're real people here, so reach
Cool.
out.
Cool. Well, Josh, as we wrap up, I just want to give you an
Uh-huh.
opportunity to share any encouragement that you have that God's placed on your heart. Maybe it has to do with compensation or something else that God's placed on your heart with our community of
Yeah,
student ministry leaders.
yeah. I'm gonna say kind of something I said in the forward of this year's report is that youth ministry should not be a revolving door. Like, please, 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 whatever I'm out, and if God is calling you to be in a different place, go to that different place. Please, like, do whatever God is calling you. But the idea that that you're any youth worker would be in a situation where they're feeling like they can't do what God has called them to do, and it's because of finances or because of education or because of whatever it is. Please do whatever you can to take those roadblocks out of the way. And most often that's going to be having a legitimate conversation, a purposeful conversation with your supervisor, because man, I mean, you can't do it alone. And if you're not having those conversations with another person, chances are good you're having those conversations just in your own head. And something about those arguments that I have in my own head, I always win those. And so like they bit lopsided. And so I would encourage you to, have those conversations with whoever actually can do something about it. And I think if we all commit to being more honest and a little healthier in those conversations, I think we're all better off for it. So go have a tough conversation. Um, that would be my encouragement,
So good.
I think.
Well, thanks again, Josh, for being a good friend, for doing
Yeah, man.
all you do for the ministry world, and just pray that God continues to bless you and your ministry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, dude. This has been fantastic. And man, anytime, literally anytime.
Before we wrap up, I also want to thank you for being here. If you've enjoyed this episode, can you just take a moment to share this with another student ministry leader or also share it on your social media? It really helps us get the word out about this youth pastor compensation report, which is such a great resource. This podcast is part of my ministry with National Network of Youth Ministries. So if you'd like to support this podcast and help us to continue putting out great content, head over to nnym.org/Steve Cullum to become one of my financial partners. You can also sign up to be a prayer partner, which is also incredibly important. And speaking of prayer, thank you so much to all those who have been praying for my youth pastor longevity research. It's been going very well. And I actually just had the opportunity to share about it at the GCRN pre-conference at Exponential Global this week. And I'm really excited to keep talking about it and hopefully have an academic journal article published this year and maybe even more in order to share some of these really significant results. I also wanted to tell you about a really cool resource that my friend, podcast guest, and coworker Travis Deans just put out called Youth Ministry Toolbox. And I actually have a quote in one of the chapters, which is kind of cool. But this is a free ebook that he's put out that I'll also be linking in the show notes. And if you guys want, I can also have him on a future episode. So just let me know through social media or something like that if you think it'd be fun to have Travis back on the show at some point to talk through this resource. And if you happen to be looking for a speaker for an upcoming youth group event or training, be sure to check out the Speaker Hub at youthmenhub.com/Speaker Hub. You'll see me and many other experienced and vetted speakers who are veterans in speaking to teenagers, adult leaders, and parents. And if you're going to be at the Ignite Youth Leadership Conference in Colorado Springs or Dare to Share's Energize Conference this spring, please be sure to look out for me and say hi. I would love to meet you in person, especially if we've never met before. And finally, if you have not subscribed on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, be sure to do so you don't miss any future episodes, but also so you can go back and check out the large archive of episodes over the last 10 years. Thanks again for being here. And until next time, be sure to stay connected and may God bless your ministry.